The video I'm about to show you has to do with an artist called Dana Schutz and a controversial painting that is called Open Casket. And I missed a few things in terms of articulating what it was that I think was objectionable to a community, to the Black community, African American community, about this artist. I didn't articulate this well enough. You'll see the rest of the video after this, but it wasn't articulated. I didn't articulate it well enough. So by the way, these are studies for my next Fukushima series of nuclear scientists. I'm working on some studies to make some paintings that have to do with the subject of Fukushima and the destruction that it's wreaking on the planet, on all life on this planet. It's just brutal. Anyway, my clarification is just that what I believe has happened in the community among Black people objecting to Dana Schutz representing their story, a white woman representing a Black history, is that they recognize that she's all about spectacle. And this is important. I failed to articulate this properly because I understand the outrage, what's going on here. I understand what's happening in this criticism against Dana Schutz, who is basically propagated in this culture of death. She's a degenerate artist that in itself, I have no problem with her work, except that in the context of what it is that we're going through, what I call the age of fission, that we're being totally decimated, and artists like Goya, which I bring up, articulated this visually very well. And Dana Schutz wants to ride on the coattails of an artist like Goya. It's very clear to me. She's like imitating. There's a lot of imitators like Francis Bacon, even Lucian Freud, people that want to ride the coattails of the dysfunction as spectacle rather than as something where I feel there is a vindication in art as exposing something and defending the other side. So I just wanted to preamble this by saying, yes, I understand the outrage in the Black community about this Dana Schutz person, who is a woman of spectacle in her art, and it's not the work I produce. It's got nothing to do with how I feel about things. And anyway, I think I'll. These are these are my studies of nuclear scientists. Here's a nuclear scientist having a little rough with his girlfriend. There he is, and you can see the nuclear scientist is breeding other nuclear scientists, and whether they're male or female doesn't matter. They can reproduce at will. Anyway, it's a preamble. This is a commentary on our demented, dysfunctional art community, something I address occasionally because I make paintings. I'm a painter, I make paintings, and I'm going to address what I'd like to highlight in terms of the context I create through my activism as an anti-nuclear activist exposing the catastrophe at Fukushima and how it's not happening in my community of artists and art. And I'm going to, you're going to see now in the background, I'll let it run through slowly and you can get this link, I'll put it below. It's an article on an artist called Dana Schutz, a woman who makes paintings, as you see right there. I sort of see her as remodernizing Cubist morphisms, a really good visual interpreter. Like you can see her stuff. Let's see here. Look at all the kind of colorful stuff. I mean, grotesque and in keeping with the nature of our twisted, warped reality that we live in right now. She's capturing it. I must say she's capturing the notion of a dysfunctional human race. As you can see, here she is right there. Little fuzzy hair of head. Basically, someone who has adapted to the trends, to the times, in terms of what obviously the museums would like to see. She's promoted. She is very talented, very good at what she does. And I'm going to now just reflect on the controversy she's created with a painting called Open Casket. And I'm going to keep running this a little bit. You can see there is an image of Open Casket at the Whitney, which was protested for being presented by an artist who is not of the community that the painting was made of. Now, the idea that African American artists and the black community would be outraged by a white artist producing a work that reflects on a history that they endured, the violent persecutions, the slavery, the history of abuse of one human being against another. And I just like to say that if you look at an article on what distinguishes, for example, sex or race, there are very few, if in fact none. Here you see there are no genetic sequences unique to blacks or whites or Asians. There is more genetic variation in populations from the continent of Africa than exists in all populations from outside of Africa. So in other words, the phenomena of race is something that has been imposed on us, and it's a clever way of really diverting people away from where we really should be paying attention. But I mean, I appreciate differences, and sometimes our history is warped and twisted by very devious people that like to pit us against each other, whether we're white on white or black on black, like Soweto, in South Africa, the Soweto, what I call the Soweto Syndrome. The blacks were totally abused, subjugated totally to the white race, but they took it out on each other. So there is no distinction of violence that people practice against each other. Now, I just want to come back to this article where artists are so upset. Primarily, I would imagine the black community that is very upset with this white woman representing their history. Now, based on the idea that our race is virtually, other than our eyeballs, in a genetic sense, it doesn't exist. Nonetheless, it has existed historically as a huge division between people. So I'm now going to give this Schutz some credit, as rather than just being, as they say, controversial. And I can see why they've picked up on this, as you can see here. Like, if you look at her imagery, she's vulgar and she's someone of spectacle. What she produces is, in a sense, offensive to almost every human being on the planet. Like, look at, yeah, okay, there you go. It's kind of like getting a rise out of someone through some version of spectacle that is related to something we feel abhorrent about. It's something that we can't really relate to very well. It creates a dysfunction in our mind. And to what end? Now, I heartily agree with the artists that are protesting her apparent, and I say it's apparent, and based on the rest of her work, I think they have a point. I think they have a point, because her fundamental motive for making a painting is to create a visual representation of our dysfunction that benefits by not exploring or defending the work. Now, when I say we have to defend our work, what I'm referring to is that if you are standing up for something, make a bloody goddamn stand. Get up at the Whitney and defend your work from every race, black, yellow, green, white, whatever. Defend it. Defend it. Stand in front of it. And it's very important for every artist to be allowed to represent, to visualize their internal world. And even degenerates like Abramowitsch doing the blood sacrifice ritual representation. She doesn't seem to do it in public, the actual ritual murder of children, people, drinking blood. I have not seen this. But outside of actually creating hurt physically, we should be allowed to represent and present any image we want to present as an artist. This is the nature of our being. Now, the people that gravitate to the perversity of that isn't my problem. It's not my problem. I present an issue. Now, what would be my problem is what she's being accused of, to try and benefit from the visual atrocity committed. And I'm not going to show a photograph of Emmett Till, who was brutalized. This young black African American was brutalized and lynched, and it's an outrage to every life form on this planet, especially human beings. And what I want to contextualize here, I want to tell people, you know, if you look into art history. Now, look at this. This is one of the most magnificent artists ever to have made imagery on the planet in the history of art, Goya. And it's a series of etchings he did called The Disasters of War etchings, which are just brutal. I mean, look at this. This is like, you need to have a major heart check. Now, compared to, this is obviously not on the level, the intensity of this is actually way beyond what Schutz is able to do in her work, because as I see her, she's like a cubist morphist aesthetic. She's basing a lot of her stuff on aesthetics. And Goya, I think, was going through just a horrendous self-analysis in this work. I mean, look at this. This is devastating to the psyche. Our psyche is completely devastated when we are subjected to images representing such atrocities. Now, my point again, what I want to, and I suppose I should show this is Emmett Till, sorry, who was brutally murdered for nothing. I mean, this was anonymous. It's a young child, a 14-year-old, 15-year-old. This is outrageous, and the story behind this is truly worthy of being represented artistically. And I applaud Dana Schutz for representing this young boy's story and the brutalization by really a really degenerate social order, social system that exists not just in the U.S. If you look at slavery worldwide, it started way back when, and the Muslims were the biggest perpetrators on the slavery side in terms of numbers. If you go into the research from somewhere around 700 to 1200 of the Common Era, the Muslims created such mayhem and destruction among populations, African populations. Anyway, my point is that these art types are such wimps and sucks. And you make your work, Dana Schutz, but I also realize what a charlatan, what a chicken shit coward you are. Defend the work, make the work, make something controversial and defend it to the public. Stand up for it. Don't hide your head in the sand behind some sort of weird aesthetic, like you don't know, geez, I don't know really what I'm doing. Oh, I thought it was just they always say, oh yeah, it was just sort of nice image. Like Francis Bacon, if you look at this artist's work, he basically mutilated bodies and said, geez, it just sort of looked good. I thought I'd sort of, yeah, pretending, creating something so outrageous and offensive to our nature, and then just walking away from it. This is called aesthetics. This is what art practices. Now, these people trying to brutalize another artist who has stepped over the boundary of white and black, which there is no boundary, people. There is no boundary between a white and a black, or an Asian, a Filipino, a brown, a light skin, dark skin. There is no separation. It's all fabricated. It's in our minds. So why get all worked up about somebody presenting this story and you're not part of that group, that community? It's kind of like saying, you know, what they've tried to, how they've tried to tar and feather Kevin Annett, a white minister for the United Church who had to quit his church, and they kicked him out because he defended the Aboriginal, the First Nations people of Canada, for having been totally and targeted for having been targeted in order to supplant them off the face of the earth so the white victors could have all their property and lands and own everything. This is why. And the reason people go along with it, even if they don't directly benefit from the wealth that is created, they have this perverse attachment to inflicting pain. People have this perverse attachment to inflicting pain. If you can't get over that, especially when you're younger, like in your like 6, 7, 8, when you experiment with animals and you do stupid things, you got to get over it at that point, because it can easily transcend into people. This sort of phase in our life has to be stopped. And for most people that engage in these atrocities against other people, even in an institutionalized way through the military, this is a leftover of a period of time when we were really young and nobody confronted us, and our conscience hadn't stepped in to say this is wrong, and then you perpetuate this behavior, this functional behavior of targeting people just because you can. Just because you can. So anyway, I wanted to reference this controversy, and I'll attach a link. You can see this. Read this article and their objections to having Dana Schutz, who is, in my mind, Dana Schutz is part of this system that has isolated spectacle, and very clever. She's very talented. Has reproduced the worst part in us without defending the opposite. That's how I see that's how I detract from this woman, this artist, who is producing work that has actually this Tillman. I keep saying Tillman. This Till painting is a fabulous representation. Not even close to this. Not even close to this. Whatever was going on here. In the sense of a body of work that actually is connected to her experience. They're right, it's not her experience, but nonetheless, I see it in this context. I see it in this context, and you know, you see her work, and she is very talented. I have to admit, she is talented in creating these vulgarizations, but then not defending what she needs to defend. I'll connect the links.